Joining us now, Pat Buchanan, author, commentator, presidential advisor. I wrote a terrific piece, A Moment of Unity in a Disintegrating World. He joins us now. Pat, it's good to talk to you. The patter that we're hearing repeated, the same lines from mostly Democrats on the size of the magazine, the bump stock, he purchased 33 guns in a year, thoughts and prayers aren't enough, They're all reading from the same tedious playbook.
They do get back on the same hobby horse and start riding it again and again and again every time one of these incidents occurs. But I think there's really, in this, I haven't seen, Laura, any mailed agenda or statement of beliefs or, some aggressive note about what the national government did to him. I think what we got here is something that's fairly clear and fairly simple. This guy decided to end his life. He decided to commit suicide either by gunshot to his mouth or either by a police shooting him. And he planned to go out as the greatest mass murderer in American history. And he moved all those guns in over 5 days and plotted this all out and began shooting and killing people down there in order that he would exceed anyone else. For example, the thing that comes to mind is when I was fairly young, Charlie Whitman, 1966, I believe it was, went up in that tower, Texas Tower at Austin, and shot, I believe, 41 people and murdered 15. This is similar to that. It's just he wants to end his life in a blaze of what for him might be glory and what for the nation is incredible horror.
Well, I think that Republicans tend to themselves get into a defensive crouch when the Democrats jump on their moral high ground here and start lecturing on guns. And I think it's precisely at this time where Americans should realize that there's not a government solution for every problem, that there is evil in the world, real evil.
This is exactly right. This is what the interesting question to me here is, what kind of evil does it take? I mean, here's someone with a dead soul. His conscience is completely dead. I mean, I don't care how bad a number of people are, they would recoil at firing a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon into a crowd of concert goers, none of whom they can have a grudge against, probably none of whom they know, and just do that, the callous and total indifference to the value of human life, that suggests to me, something is dead inside. What was it Raskolnikov who said, if God is dead, everything is permissible. And this individual clearly believes that he's not going to suffer any more, other than that gunshot to his head that killed him, for what he has done, this horror he has perpetrated on living human beings. I'd really be more interested in the character of that man's soul and what it was like than whether he sent some agenda, that the federal government has abused me and I've had trouble with the IRS.
Well, I think that we live in a society where there's so much depravity. I mean, at every turn. I was in New York the last couple of days, and it's fun to go to New York. I mean, I had to be there for Fox, and I have a lot of great memories with my brothers there as a kid, and even when the difficult times of crime and so forth. It's always been fun. But walking across Times Square, now you run into women that have just Band-Aids on their breasts and are essentially wearing thongs, walking around with body paint, and children. There's just it's the level of sort of pornography, violent pornography, and run-of-the-mill just kind of gross stuff.
Right, it is
everywhere.
Whatever they say about the 1950s, which were a pretty good time, and wasn't a saintly decade. The complete de-Christianization of the culture and of the natural, the prohibitions in society and the restraints and the beliefs that people followed about about modesty and decency and morality and things. That's gradually, it takes generations once the root is cut. But the root has been cut, and I think the situation is not going to get better and better. Indeed, must have been, now there are so many we can't count of these mass murders where individuals just go in and shoot and kill as many people as they can, knowing full well that they're going to command unprecedented coverage. Look what we got out there. You got every commentator talking about it. We're talking about it a couple of days later.
Yeah.
You got all Fox News, CNN, MSNBC,
like
all
there's no other
there.
Story. There's no other story.
Well, exactly, and this guy is a nobody, and now he's
a somebody. That's why I reject covering this 24/7. I don't like it. It doesn't feel right to me. This is why. See, this is the currency he wanted to be paid in. And he's being paid. This was a success for this guy because we got North Korea and Puerto Rico and everything all off page one, and you read more and more about him and the 100,000 he sent to the Philippines, and is there a note somewhere, and all this interest in him, and nobody gave a damn about that guy for his whole life, and now everybody in the world is talking and writing about him, which is his reward. He succeeded. And it's perverse in that the media culture,
to the society.
Yeah, that the media culture, which back in 1996, when I started at MSNBC, I dubbed it Tragedy TV, TTV, whether it was JonBenet Ramsey or Chandra Levy or Natalie Holloway, these stories in a way are easier to cover.
Well, but they say something about society because the editors picking the placement and sending the reporters know what folks want to read.
Well, in the absence of anything else, they'll watch it. I mean, I do believe that. I do believe that
war with North Korea is a pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fascinating, Pat. I think what the fact that we have Puerto Rico that was on the verge of bankruptcy, now it could cost us $1 trillion to rebuild Puerto Rico.
Verge, Laura, they're not on the verge.
Yeah, bankrupt.
They are there.
Yeah, well, now they clearly are, but it's teetering, and now we're
teetering. But it is. But the tragedy of those people, it's an enormous.
Awful.
It's a big island. What's it, 100 miles by 40 miles or something like that, and it's almost all of the power out, and you can imagine the suffering and
awful. Imagine if we had that $135 billion a year we spend on the illegal immigrants, Pat.
Well,
a lot of money.
There's a lot of things that we spend money on that could be better spent, going down and helping out those folks down there.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of Trump throwing those paper towels at the crowd? That was kind of
extremely classy.
What was that? What are you doing? What are you doing? Throwing paper towels at people?
I'm ceased.
I don't know what to say, and I like the guy.
I'm not making explanations anymore.
No. That's just, he's a different animal.
He's a different creature.
It's an icebreaker. Exactly right. Maybe it's an icebreaker, Pat.
Frankly, I wasn't all that bothered by it, but it is something you would not expect Dwight Eisenhower to have done.
No.
He's bringing... Pat, he's trying to bring a New Orleanian flair, a kind of Mardi Gras enthusiasm to the proceedings, trying to lighten their load, maybe.
And as he left, he said, "Have a good time." Have a good time. Okay, you too.
It was right. We're enjoying it.
Well, that's what you do. Hillary Clinton was on some obscure podcast. Pat, here's what I say. When I'm going on an obscure podcast, I need you to come over to my house and just smother me with a pillow, okay? I preferably 400 thread count down pillow, or a My Pillow. But I want you to smother me, okay? Because Hillary is now relegated to going on obscure podcasts that have like 4 or 5 listeners, and this is what she said.
It is a sign of the deep dysfunction of this government and this Republican Party that has been taken over by extreme elements to the point that they are doing whatever they're told to do. Yeah. There is no room for discretion, for conscience. It is heartbreaking.
It's the same exact thing, speaking of playbook, that Michelle said last week.
Well, to me, that just says you don't like your voice. You like the thing we're told to like.
Yeah, you like the thing you're told to like. You're not thinking for yourself. Then Hillary, lo and behold, repeats that this week. Extreme elements within the party. Pat, they were saying that about you when the pitchforks were in New Hampshire back in '92.
Well, they might have had a point.
Yeah. Well.
No, but listen, this is, the protest and the wailing. You got to realize what Hillary Clinton is, look, heavily favored, the odds-on favorite candidate for the nomination in the election, and she lost to the folks she describes. Now, that says more to me about her and her inabilities and her lack of connection with the American people than it does about anybody else. I mean, this is the ultimate in sour grapes.
Well, and she, of course, doesn't acknowledge the fact that the most extreme elements in American politics are those who defend abortion on demand, who have no ability to debate any moral question or cultural issue without just demonizing the other side. To me, it's extreme to keep doing these stupid trade deals that have offshored our income, our jobs.
Look,
that's extreme.
Exactly. And look, I don't know, we may have a lot of failings on our side of the fence, but I'm not sure that we are in need of lectures on morality from Bill and Hillary Clinton, frankly. On what is right and what the conscience teaches you to do, etc. You're right. I mean, we're a country that since 1973, I think, has carried out, 55 million abortions, the destruction of the lives of unborn children, many of them all the way moved almost to birth, and then to be lecturing folks on morality. I don't think we need it.
No. In your column, Pat, you referenced Barcelona as you talked about the rising populism. My book comes out next week, The Populist Revolution from Reagan to Trump. It's called Billionaire at the Barricades. And I talk about this in the book, but I loved how you referenced this Catalan movement for independence. The vote was called illegal by Spain, and thus the United States would not condone it or support it. What's going on there?
Well, there's a movement many movements across Europe that overlap. One of them is, and you can call it by the right word, which is tribalism. The people of Catalonia, a huge slice of them, probably more than half now, identify more with their fellow Catalans, and they're Catalans first and Spaniards second, and they want to realize they want to create their own nation state, and they want to have their own culture and their own separate identity. We saw that in Scotland. We saw it in Quebec, where it barely failed also. You can see it in Padania in northern Italy. You can see it in Bavaria. Flanders wants to move out of Belgium. These are sub-nations. That's one of the great movements, tribalism, which is pulling at the EU. And another is to secede to overthrow the big central government that's rising over people in Europe. And then you got the north-south divide between the haves and have-nots, who are the haves imposing austerity on the have-nots. And then you got the great movement coming across the Mediterranean, where Africa's going to have not 1 but 2 billion people by mid-century. Many of them are coming across the Mediterranean. They're going to be trying to come across. They're coming out of the Middle East. And you got declining populations in every country in Europe, I think, except for Iceland, since 1975. And so I think you're having a defensive recoil, and it is really a camp of the saints moment.
Yeah,
Poland, all these forces are being propelled by it.
And they didn't vote for it. They didn't want it. Poland says no. Czech Republic says no. So far this year, more than 104,000 people have entered Italy, most of them before mid-July. Those are the refugees, overwhelmingly Islamic, overwhelmingly young males. 104,000. That's considered progress. Pat Buchanan on The Laura Ingraham Show.